When I wrote my very first manifesting course back in 2003, I included a list of 10 laws of power, which probably would be better listed as the laws of manifesting. In this video, I'm going to share these 10 laws with you and describe how they work. And hopefully this will give you a better understanding of what makes manifesting work, how to do it to get the best results possible, and how to save time by not bothering doing things that are not likely to work anyways. So let's go ahead and get started. The first most important law of manifesting is what I would call the law of spirituality. And what this law communicates to us is that there is a level of reality beyond the physical, which many people call spiritual, and this non-physical, metaphysical level of reality is actually stronger, more powerful than the physical world around us. Now, this is a very important belief to have because when we truly accept this idea that the spiritual reality is more powerful than the physical reality, that allows us to see positive results from our manifesting efforts. One of the biggest problems I had when I first started all this was that I thought the physical world was so dense, so powerful in its existence that mere thought couldn't really affect it one way or another. And that's why when I first started, I saw very little results in my manifesting efforts. Once I fully understood that the spiritual level, this non-physical level reality, was more powerful than the physical world around me, that's when I started seeing much better results from my manifesting efforts. So that's the first law of manifesting that I wanted to share with you. The next one is what I would call the law of belief. And it ties in with what I was just saying. When we believe that the spiritual, non-physical level reality is more powerful than the physical, that allows us to see positive results. What we see in the world around us is a reflection of what we believe, or at least that's one theory of how manifesting works. That gets into working models. I talked about working models in a different video. I'll link to that up here so you can get to that one later if you want to. But our beliefs shape our experience of reality. And that's probably the most generic way to say that because it encompasses a lot of different working models. What we believe influences what we experience in life. Now, you can say that life is a reflection of what we believe. You can say that our beliefs attract certain things into our life. You can say beliefs operate in many different ways. But the bottom line is that our belief is the foundation that causes manifestations to happen. And when we recognize that and we work with that, then our manifesting efforts can be much more effective. So that's the second law of manifesting that I wanted to share with you. The third gets a little bit more into the mechanics of how it works. And this is what many people call the law of cause and effect. Some people also call it the law of karma. Basically, what this says is that everything happens for a reason. There are no accidents in the world. There are things that look like accidents, but they happen because of non-physical forces that have been put into motion. There are no accidents. Everything happens for a reason. And so if you want to change something in the world around you, you start by working with your beliefs. You start by working on that non-physical spiritual level, and that is what creates the experiences in our lives. And it creates it through a cause and effect relationship. Our beliefs are the causes, the effects are the physical world, the experiences that we have in the physical world. And so that's the cause and effect relationship. Very simple, very easy to understand. I also talked about how what most people call karma is really a side effect of this cause and effect dynamic going on. I'll also link to that video because I just did another video on that as well. Okay, so we've talked about the law of spirituality, the law of belief, the law of cause and effect. The next law I want to talk about is what I call the law of invocation. And basically what this law says is that when we set aside an intentional effort, when we put forth an intentional effort, when we set aside time to intentionally create a specific effect, this specific invocation of the manifesting process is much more powerful, much more effective than any collection of random thoughts, feelings, and beliefs we may have engaged in earlier in the day or at some other time, whether it's earlier or later, it doesn't really matter that much. So what this is really telling us is that if you find yourself in a funk, if you have been in a bad mood and you have been feeling negative emotions and you've been thinking about things that, well, this has gone wrong, that's gone wrong, I don't like this, and you've been in this kind of a mood for a couple of hours, you can very quickly clear that away and overpower that cause that will eventually lead to an effect down the road unless it's counterbalanced. You can overpower that with a specific invocation of, no, everything is good. I am creating a positive future for myself. Everything lines up perfectly for me. And this is the intention that I am setting forth. I am invoking the power of manifesting to make this happen for me. And by just doing that, 5 minutes in a specific intentional effort to invoke manifesting into your life, that can completely overpower hours of negative thoughts and feelings that may have occurred at some other time. So that's the power of invocation. And in that, I also talked about balancing, that the specific invocation can counterbalance the negative things that have happened in a general random way. And that gets into the next law of manifesting, that there is this law of balance where the positive energies that you put forward and the negative energies that you put forward, they kind of balance each other out to some degree. And that as long as you do more of one than the other, then the balance will be more to that side than the other. Let me give you a very specific example. Okay, so let's say that you've spent 3 or 4 hours thinking about everything that's gone wrong in your life. And then you take 10 minutes to specifically focus on creating something positive in your life. So that 3 or 4 hours of general random thoughts and feelings may have put forth, say, 5 pounds of effort on one side of the scale. And here with balance, we're going to look at a scale. We put 5 pounds on one side of the scale. With 10 minutes of a very specific focused effort of manifesting something positive, it's like we're putting 10 pounds onto the other side of the scale. So 5 pounds on one, 10 pounds on the other, it's going to switch over to that side. So 2/3 of the energy that you put out in that time period may be positive and only 1/3 negative. Now, if you think about this in a different context, let's say we're mixing hot water and cold water. Well, if we have 1/3 cold water and 2/3 hot water, and we mix those together, the temperature is neither going to be as cold as what the cold water started out, nor as hot as the hot water started out, but it'll be somewhere in the middle, roughly 1/3 away from where the hot water started out. You see what I mean? So when we send out energy, and this, again, just a different working model, it's not always just sending out energy, but when we are creating an effect, if we are setting up causes that will eventually lead to the effect that either we want or the effect that we don't want, either the intentional or the random, it's all of that energy is still going to have an effect. It's just that if we put out more effort, if we put out more energy, if we set our intention more towards the positive than the negative, then the effect that we get will be more positive than it is negative. There will still be a little bit of that negative energy that will come into play. So the suggestion here is that if you find yourself expressing negative thoughts, negative emotions, you want to more than overpower those with the intentional invocation of what you want. You want to pile on the good stuff and pile on that positive energy so that it completely eclipses the negative stuff that you put out unintentionally. Okay, so that's the law of balance. So the next law that I'm going to talk about is one that could be called the law of cycles. And this is something that we see in nature everywhere. There are cycles in every situation. There's the cycle of night and day. There's the cycle of full moon to new moon. There's the cycle of the seasons. There are cycles everywhere. That is a part of the way our universe works. And so there are cycles where it's very easy to manifest things. And there are cycles where it may be more difficult to manifest certain things and easier to manifest other things. Let's kind of go back to the example of the seasons. If you wanted to manifest a garden, it's a lot easier to do that in the summer. In the winter, it's easier to manifest peace, calm, clarity. So there are times when it's easier to manifest one thing. There are times when it's easier to manifest something completely different. And so in this, it's good to kind of keep a journal with your manifesting efforts and the things that you are working to manifest. And you might notice this pattern where it's really easy to manifest money for a period of time, and then it may be a little more difficult to manifest money for a period of time. And that's okay. That's just the way of cycles. And so you allow the cycles to say, okay, maybe it's not time to do that right now. Maybe it's time to do something else. And this something else may be something else that you would like to manifest that is just different from the other thing. And I know I'm talking huge generalities here. I'm trying to keep this a very short video. Okay. So the law of cycles. There are times when it's easy to manifest one thing. There are times when it's easier to manifest something else. You just kind of have to figure out what cycle you're currently in for your life and work with it. Okay, so there's the law of cycles. The next law that I'm going to talk about could be labeled a couple different ways. In that original course back in 2003, I called it the law of development. Sometime later, I started calling it the law of growth. Some people call this the law of grace. And what this is telling us, what this is indicating to us, what it is teaching us, is that life is set up in such a way that there is a tendency towards growth. There's a tendency towards advancement. There's a tendency towards a positive effect. So what this is saying is that if you did put out equal amounts of energy, equal amounts of thought, equal amounts of belief between a positive and a negative thing, the final result, even though the law of balance says that they might balance each other out completely and end up with a zero result, the law of grace, the law of development, the law of growth, whatever you want to call it, says that if the two forces that are coming into this are completely equal, the result will be slightly positive. So it's kind of like if you're driving down the road, and if your tires are in perfect alignment and you're driving down a straight road on a flat surface, if you let go of the steering wheel, most likely the car will continue to go in a straight line for a period of time. If the wheels are a little bit out of alignment and you let go of the steering wheel on that straight road, the car will veer off slightly one way or the other, either left or right. And what this law of grace is saying is that the road of your life, if you let go of the steering wheel and just let everything go, it will tend towards the side of the road that is towards the positive. So there is kind of a built-in safety net in our life experience, and that's what the law of growth, the law of grace is describing. Now, this growth, this development, leads us into becoming more advanced manifestors. We get lots of practice in our life. and we tend to grow and become better at whatever we do. This next law that I'm going to talk about is what I call the law of the fittest. And what this means is that if two people are competing for the same thing, and a classic example of this is lotteries. In a big lottery that has a multi-million-dollar prize, you usually have quite a few people all with a ticket to that lottery, all focusing on, I'm going to win this lottery. That money is mine. I am the winner. And there's a lot of people focusing on winning that particular lottery. Well, the law of the fittest says the person who is the best manifester is the one who's actually going to win. Because yes, there are times when you get multiple winners of a lottery. And in those cases, it's kind of that law of balance. They were relatively equal in their manifesting ability. But all those who were less capable in their manifesting abilities, they're the ones that were focusing on winning the lottery, and then they don't win. They weren't as powerful of a manifester as those who actually did win. And sometimes there are subconscious elements involved that someone could win without even intending to, without setting that intention. They just have a belief that, yeah, people win the lottery all the time. Anybody can win. Yeah, I could win. And that's all they ever do. If their consciousness is in a particular state that allows for that experience to enter into their lives, then it can enter into their lives. So there is that. Okay, so only two more laws to talk about in this video. The next one is what I call the law of momentum. And this is something that we see in the physical world all the time. When you have a heavy object that is sitting in one place, it takes a lot of effort to get it moving. And it could be a car that's stalled by the side of the road. If you've ever had to push a car out of a ditch, and I've had that experience a couple of times, so I know what it's like. Getting the car moving is the toughest part. And this is even if it's on a straight road. If it's on a flat surface, getting that car moving is the hardest thing. And it might take 2 or 3 people to actually get it moving. But the law of momentum says that once you get that heavy thing moving, then it's a lot easier to keep it moving. It goes back to Newton's laws of motion. A body at rest will tend to stay at rest. A body in motion will tend to stay in motion. Either one unless acted upon by an outside force. Well, manifesting kind of works the same way. If everything is stationary, if everything is static in our lives and nothing is really changing, getting the first momentum, the first movement started is the toughest part of the manifesting process. Once you have some momentum going, it's a lot easier to keep it going and to accelerate it. Going back to another common example, the financial abundance. So if you have been stuck on a plateau for a period of years and your life has taken on its own status quo, changing that may take more effort in the beginning than it will later on. So let's say that you've made $20,000 a year for a period of time. And I know right now that is a really low level of income, at least here in the United States. So let's say you've been on that very low level of making $20,000 a year for a period of years. And now you really want to manifest $100,000 a year income. Okay, so you might have to spend a period of time getting from 20,000 into something that makes you 25,000 a year. But the amount of effort that it took to go from 20 to 25, if you duplicate that same degree of effort, you will go from 25 to 35, or maybe even 45, with the same amount of effort that it took to go from 20 to 25. So that's the law of momentum. Getting things started is the hardest part of the process. Once it's started, it becomes a lot easier. So that can apply in many different situations. It can apply to a specific manifestation. It can also apply to the skill of manifesting itself. The first couple of things that you manifest are going to be much harder for you to manifest than once you have developed a track record of success And you know that, okay, I've done this 5 or 6 times. I know I can do it again. And part of that is the belief, because once you have done it a few times, you know you can do it. Once you see some progress, it's easier to believe that you can continue that progress. So this law of momentum could be contained within that law of belief that I talked about earlier. But I think it's fitting, I think it's worthwhile to talk about it as a separate law in itself. Okay, the last law that I'm going to talk about here is one that I call a law of association. And basically what this means is that our minds associate one thing with another. And anytime we activate the thought of one thing, the thought of the other thing that's associated with that also comes up. As an example, if we just simply talk about the color red as an example, and we just want someone to visualize the color red, well, there are a number of things that could come up in their minds when they're thinking about that red thing. It depends on how closely their mind associates the color red with these other things. Someone could imagine someone in a Santa Claus suit because the Santa Claus suit is red. Someone might think of a fire because sometimes the fire does appear to have reddish tones in it. Someone might think of a sunset because the sunset has reddish tones in it. It depends on what the individual mind associates most closely with the color of red. Okay, so in manifesting, we can use symbols to manifest. There are a lot of people who have taken the idea of symbolism and associated green candles, the color green, with money. And so with this law of association, anytime they burn a green candle, their mind associates that with creating an energy for money. And so that acts as a symbol to their mind to trigger that belief that whenever they burn that green candle, money comes into their experience. That is the law of association. We associate symbols with actual fact. And our minds do work on symbols just as easily as anything else. And so if you have a symbol for what you would like to manifest, let's say the idea is just general success. I want to be successful, whatever that might mean. If you think about what symbol represents success to you, and for me, whenever I ask myself what symbol represents success, I see this statue, this trophy, something like the Golden Globes Award or some Emmy Award or something along that line. And so that type of statue, that type of symbolic award is what my mind associates with the idea of success. So if I want to manifest greater success in my life, all I have to do is close my eyes and imagine that symbol, and I give that symbol energy, I give it strength, I give it size, I make it bigger in my mind. And that is communicating to my deeper mind what I want to have happen, which is to grow that success, to make that success even more powerful than it has been. So these are the 10 laws of manifesting. And if you think about how these different laws apply to whatever it is that you're doing in the moment, it will help guide your decisions to do better work at manifesting what you want. Put more of your effort into things that are likely to work and less effort into things that are less likely to work. The one thing that is really the tricky part here is the law of cycles, because sometimes you don't always know which part of the cycle you're in for the specific manifesting goal that you're at. So what I would suggest, the takeaway that I want to give you here is that between the law of cycles and the law of momentum, depending on which part of your cycle you're in, and the fact that momentum is always a factor when you're just starting out with something. If you're starting a new manifesting program, project, process, if you're starting something new, give it time to work. Allow it to get past the starting momentum and allow it to get out of the down cycle into an up cycle, before you give up on the project. Stick with it. Perseverance is an incredibly valuable thing to have. Keep working at it. Keep putting your best effort into it. Keep developing your skills to focus your mind, bring in all the feelings and vivid imagination of what you would like to manifest, and anchor all that into your mind with faith. Keep practicing those skills, developing your abilities to manifest, and eventually it will work for you. I went through a lot of effort in my early days. Like I said, I started with some negative beliefs. I had to change those. I started with a very weak degree of focus, a weak willpower to focus my mind. I started with a lot of negative conditions, a lack of ability. And through years of practice and experimentation and trying one thing after another, I eventually did develop the skills. And I eventually figured out that these three skills are the core of manifesting. And that if you stick with them long enough, they will work for you. So that is really the biggest takeaway that I can give you right now because of those two variable laws that are kind of hard to determine. Stick with it, keep working, consider how the other laws may apply to your unique situation. You'll eventually get there. So until next time, be blessed, my friend.